First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation. Also like to thank Joe for supporting the Roche Alumni Club. As 3 of the 4 of us on the podium and a few other speakers are proud members of that organization. We've heard from Kevin talking about the experience with Celgene, with oncology products. We heard from John talking about Solaris and the rare disease aspect. What I want to talk to you about today a little bit is just step back and look at the concept of marketing commercialization within the specialty care environment, and just talk a little bit about the breadth of activities and some of the key challenges that come with operating in that environment. So my first question actually just set things off, and we started with that in terms of the company product mix. But I wanted to ask specifically, are you currently or have you previously worked in a commercial role, whether that's marketing and or sales, in any of the specialty areas like oncology, HIV, neurology, rare diseases, transplant, it goes on. But either answer yes or no. So almost 50-50, yes and no, excellent. And it's a great conference when you have Joan Jett doing their lead-ins. So about half the audience has, half the audience hasn't. For those who have, I apologize if I'm redundant. For those who haven't, maybe we can hit some salient points. Joe wanted me to just spend a minute going over who Gilead Sciences is. We're a Bay Area-based company in Canada now for 5 years. Steve is from STI. We're the STD company. We focus on HIV and hepatitis, also cardiovascular and respiratory diseases. We have a commercial presence and medical, regulatory, legal presence in Mississauga. Interestingly, we have also an active chemical manufacturing facility in Edmonton. So we do all of our research API development out of Edmonton, Alberta. So when we talk about specialty care, everybody has a different definition of it, but what is a specialty market or specialty product? And I just sort of put up 5 points, 5 areas that I've sort of seen in my experience. Usually very expensive, complex therapies. Things like Avastin from Genentech Roche at the time, a couple of years ago, $18,000 for 3 cycles of therapy. An HIV regimen nowadays costs anywhere from $10,000 to about $18,000 a year. A very small number of target customers in terms of prescriber base. If you look at the HIV market, we have 200 key prescribers in the country. That's it, that's all. And of that, probably 150 drive 90% of the business. The audience itself is very knowledgeable and very small. In fact, they're probably the people that wrote the textbook that you're learning from, or that your sales force or that your team is learning from. And with that comes a significant clinical, and I would even say academic and professional reputation within their thinking. They don't want to be told that they're wrong or try to advance their knowledge. In terms of the knowledge itself, it's very rapidly advanced, and I think that's what we'll touch on a little bit later. One of the key challenges in this area is that it's a conference-to-conference generation of information and generation of momentum. Every year everybody lines up to go to ASCO. If you're in the oncology area, if you're in retroviruses and HIV, you worry about what happens in February at CROI, because things do evolve and move very quickly. And interestingly enough, and probably the appeal to pharma, is that it's becoming a chronic care market. In the old days, specialty was if you lived for 3 months, that was the specialty market. Nowadays, with things like transplant immunosuppression, with MS therapy, HIV antivirals, even targeted cancer agents, you're looking at now this becoming a chronic market. You're looking at 10, 15, 20 years of survival in these diseases. And with that comes a lot of interesting challenges around compliance, patient adherence, things that you never used to think about in terms of the specialty market 5 years earlier. So when you look at starting at the top, planning for it, if you're a marketing manager, brand team within it, if you take maybe the sort of more traditional approach of just promotion strategy as marketing, you have your long-term strategic objectives, product positioning, and you really are focusing on promotional strategy, communications to healthcare professionals, the sales force, what you do at conferences. I think one of the key differences in the specialty area is that it's a much broader spectrum of activities you've got to consider. Regulatory strategy in terms of your label, your indications, market access, as we heard about earlier, certainly a big part of that. And even, as we just heard from our previous speaker, the medical affairs strategy with respect to ad boards, MSLs, medical information. As a marketer, as a commercial person, that breadth of activity has to be in your thinking when you get into the specialty area. A lot of times, because you're in a smaller business unit or a smaller company, you're the N of one, so you've got to do it all. But in a larger organization, certainly as we'll see, all of these factors come into play in terms of the overall marketing mix, maybe more so than just simply a focus on promotions. And when you look at that marketing mix, the more traditional sort of primary care marketing mix that's been there, put up here, you spend obviously a lot of your spend on things like journal ads, detail aids, samples. The difference with the specialty mix, and it becomes a little bit of a challenge to kind of sell this to your senior management, is that there's a lot more spending on the customer-facing activities. Just as an example, maybe 30% of your spend is put on key opinion leader development, whether that's individual programs, individual activities at centers or hospitals, and then a large amount of spending potentially also put on things like advisory boards. So the difference between the two is where previously you'd have more communication focus, more sales representative focus. Certainly in the specialty product mix, the specialty marketing mix, much more of your spend has to be put on those activities that reach out, touch the customer, and actually face the customer. Speaking of those customers, usually, and this is some data from the States in terms of the bar chart, you see a much smaller relative audience size than some other therapeutic areas. Just an example, oncologists in the US, certainly much smaller size of audience than you would have for cardiologists or OBGYNs. The other challenge that you have is that it's a relatively high value per prescriber. Take our example at Gilead, we have 6 HIV representatives across the country. On average, each one of those representatives covers a $20 million territory. Some much higher than that when you get out west, a little bit lower than that in Eastern Canada, but each representative is working in a $20 million business. Obviously, challenges that come with that in terms of you lose one account, you lose one customer, a big hit to your business, but even think about the interaction of the representative with the company. If a lot of that customer knowledge stays in their brain and doesn't come back into the company, a very significant risk in terms of what you would lose if that person moved on. I think the other challenge too, and an interesting thing, is that there's little relative variation amongst the prescribers. They're all, when you've only got 200 people and about 100 that drive your business, or in some other therapeutic areas, maybe 20, 25, 30, they're all high prescribers, and they have to be treated that way. It comes a challenge when it looks at segmentation and various other aspects of planning around that group.